Our movie begins ominously. An old timmy car is driving up to a ginormous mansion at night time, while spooky music plays. Ooh, we can almost feel the murder mystery vibes in the air. The driver parks his car in front of the house and approaches the front door with a bag in his hands. In the porch are two vicious-looking dogs. Luckily, the man throws them a bone from his bag and the doggies back off and start to chow down. The man then chains up the dogs and head inside. In his way, he steps in a little pile of doggy poo-poo. Yuck. Cue a series of poop jokes now. We finally see the inside of the mansion, as the man enters and a title card tells us that this is all taking place in New England 1954. Well, that explains the old timmy car. In another room in the house, a busty blonde maid is dancing to shake, rattle, and roll, while polishing some crystal. The man turns off the music and asks the maid if she's ready for tonight, and if she has her instructions. She tells him that she's all said in French, which means she's not only a sexy maid, she's a sexy French maid. The man then heads over to the kitchen, where the cook is sharpening knives. When the man asks if everything's alright, the cook points the knife at him and lets him know that dinner will be ready at 7:30. How's that for service? The doorbell rings and the man heads to let in his guest. Out on the porch the man greets the visitor, who he addresses as Colonel Mustard. When the visitor tries to explain that he's not actually named after a condiment, the man tells him that he might want to stick with the alias for now. The man introduces himself to Colonel Mustard as Wadsworth, the butler. That makes sense. Wadsworth shows the colonel into the library and tells the French maid, named Yvette, to give the colonel anything he needs, within reason. Sorry to burst your bubble, Colonel Mustard. The doorbell rings again. This time it's Mrs. White and she's holding a letter. Wadsworth escorts Mrs. White into the library, where she seems to recognize Yvette. Curious. Out on the road near the house, a woman is having car trouble. And it's starting to rain. Another car passes and offers her a ride to her destination. Turns out they are both headed to the same place, M-Hill House. Back at the house, Wadsworth introduces the group to an older woman who's going by the name Mrs. Peacock. The doorbell rings again and it's Mr. Green. He's looking for the address to meet Mr. Body. Mr. Green isn't the most confident man in the planet. When Wadsworth tells the dogs in the porch to sit, Mr. Green does it instead. The man and the woman from the road pull up to the house in the thunder and rain. Of course, the man can't resist the chance to cop a feel in the woman's rear end. Lovely. They ring the bell and are greeted by Wadsworth as Professor Plum and Miss Scarlet. Looks like the gang's all here. Wadsworth explains to the group that no one is going by their real name tonight. Oh, we wonder why ellipsis points, and just then, the cook rings the gong for dinner. Mr. Green manages to spill champagne on Miss Peacock and she's not amused. Not even a little bit. We are no. The 6 guests make their way to the dining room, where Wadsworth invites them to sit down. Colonel Mustard asks if Wadsworth will be joining them and he says he won't, he's only a humble butler. So, what does he do? He buttles, of course. The guests ask about the 7th empty chair at the table. Is that for their host? No, Wadsworth tells them, it's for Mr. Body. But isn't Mr. Body their host? Curiouser and curiouser. The 6 guests all start eating and slurping soup. Finally, Mrs. Peacock breaks the silence. She tells everyone she's used to being a hostess, as part of her husband's work. She has no clue what she's doing in this house, but she's gonna have a good time. Oh, and isn't the soup good? Mrs. White asks what Mrs. Peacock's husband does. She starts to say, but then stops herself. Mr. Green recognizes her. No. He works in Washington, too. Professor Plum guesses that Mrs. Peacock must be married to a politician. Mrs. Peacock asks Mrs. White what her husband does. Nothing, the lady replies. He just lies around in his back all day. Miss Scarlet thinks that sounds like hard work. Yvette serves the second course and Mrs. Peacock loves it. It's one of her favorite recipes. Wadsworth tells her that he already knows that. Ellipsis points. Professor Plum mentions that he knows a bit about psychological medicine, but he's not a practicing doctor. He works for the World Health Organization in family planning. The colonel confirms that he's a real colonel and Miss Scarlet asks him if he finds it coincidental that he also lives in Washington, D.C. How does she know that? Well, let's just say she's seen him around. So, Miss Scarlet lives in Washington, D.C., too. Looks like everyone lives in Washington or has a government job. Okay, this is getting weird. Colonel Mustard is ticked. Where is their host and why have they been brought here? He demands to know. Just then, the doorbell rings. Of course, The guests overhear Wadsworth letting a man who asks why Wadsworth is locking the door behind him. Wadsworth also refuses to give out the key and the man refuses to give out his briefcase full of surprises. Ellipsis points. Wadsworth brings the man into the dining room and introduces him as Mr. Body. Yvette brings out a bowl of soup for Mr. Body, but he tells her to take it back. She clearly knows this guy and doesn't like him. We don't think we do either. Mrs. Peacock demands to know once and for all, while they're all here. Wadsworth explains that everyone received a letter. The letter said that they should all come to this address at this time, so that Mr. Body could bring to end a painful financial liability. Everyone got this letter. Even Mr. Body. Except his letter was different. Isn't that interesting? Would anyone like some fruit or dessert? Wadsworth asks. No one is in the mood for treats, Wadsworth. So, the butler suggests that everyone make their way into the study to figure out what the heck is going on in this super spooky mansion. There's no one in the study, but Wadsworth tells everyone to have a brandy and a seat. Wadsworth opens an envelope in the desk and tells everyone that he's going to explain what all the guests have in common. Mr. Body asks Wadsworth if the guests know who he is. Wadsworth doesn't think so and Mr. Body suddenly tells everyone this is a hoax and they should leave. He makes a run for the front door, but it's locked. Wadsworth tells everyone to head back into the study, but Mr. Body makes a break for the conservatory, where he tries to smash a window and escape. Ellipsis points only to stopped by those nasty dogs from before. Back in the study, Yvette passes out drinks and Wadsworth explains that everyone in this room is being blackmailed. None of them know who's blackmailing them. No. Mrs. Peacock objects, but no one else tries to deny the truth. Wadsworth sends Yvette out of the room and reads off the reasons why each of the guests is being blackmailed. Oh, this should be good. Professor Plum was once a psychiatrist, but he lost his license for getting freaky with one of his lady patients. Mrs. Peacock took bribes in exchange for delivering votes from her husband, who's a senator. Mrs. Peacock protests that this is all a vicious lie, but Wadsworth points out that she's been paying the blackmail money for over a year to keep the story out of the newspapers. So it might be a little bit true, right? Miss Carly is the only one of the group who admits that she's actually done the deed she's being blackmailed for. She runs a prostitution ring in Washington, D.C. And how does she know Colonel Mustard? He's one of her clients. And she has photographs. The Colonel also drives a pretty expensive car for someone with a military salary. No, the Colonel explains in that she actually came into money when his parents died. Oh, did you, Colonel? Mrs. White's husband died under mysterious circumstances. He was a nuclear physicist, but also a bit of an all-round. Of course, Mrs. White was out the evening he was killed and didn't have anything to do with the fact that his head and his you-know-what got chopped off. Ouch. Mr. Green tells everyone that the reason he's paying blackmail money is because he works for the State Department and he's gay. He's not ashamed of it, but he also doesn't want to lose his job. No one else really seems to care. And what about Mr. Body? He's the one blackmailing everyone. Oh, no he didn't. The guests try to attack Mr. Body, but Wadsworth tells them to stop. The police are coming. All the guests have to do is tell the police that Mr. Body has been blackmailing them and their problems are solved. Not quite, Wadsworth. Mr. Body tells Wadsworth he'll never get a chance to tell the police. No so. Wadsworth has all the evidence and he's having a tape record this conversation from inside the billiard room. The police will arrive in 45 minutes and Mr. Body will go to jail. Looks like an open and shut case to us. Mr. Body has other plans. He goes into the hall to get his briefcase and opens it up. He has presents for everyone. He passes out 6 different ribbon-wrapped boxes and the guests open them. Miss Carly's box contains a candlestick. Mrs. White gets a bit of rope tied into a noose. Mr. Green's has a lead pipe. Colonel Mustard sees a wrench inside his box. Professor Plum has a revolver. And Mrs. Peacock receives a knife. Mr. Body tells them they each have a lethal weapon now. If they tell the police about him, he'll make sure that they all get exposed. But if one of the 6 guests kills Wadsworth now, they can all go in their merry, murdering way. Then, Mr. Body flicks off the lights in the dark. A man gasps. The revolver goes off. A woman screams. Mrs. Peacock turns in the light and gasps as she drops her knife. Mr. Body is lying on the floor dead. Professor Plum checks Mr. Body's body. Their blackmailer is dead. But who killed him? The guests accuse Professor Plum, since they heard his revolver go off in the dark. But the professor claims that someone tried to take the gun from him. Besides, Mr. Body hasn't been shot. The gun hit this in the mantle instead. If he wasn't shot, then how did he die? Someone had to kill him. Mrs. Peacock takes a drink of brandy, as Professor Plum realizes that Mr. Body might have been poisoned. The lady screams hysterically until Mr. Green smacks her. Just then, everyone hears a scream coming from the billiard room. The guests rush to the room and Eva opens the door. She's fine, but a little shaken up. After all, there is a murderer in the house. The guests tell Eva to come back to the study with them and Wadsworth removes the reel-to-reel tape recording of their conversation. Back in his study, Wadsworth explains that he never intended anyone to die. Well, it's a little late for that now, Wadsworth. Turns out it was the butler wrote the letters and invited everyone. See, Wadsworth and his wife were being blackmailed by Mr. Body, too. In fact, his wife took her own life after years of working for Mr. Body for free to keep him quiet. Mr. Body didn't like all the un-American activities that he saw going on, so he decided to put his information to good use and make a little money. Hey, that is actually pretty American. What was Wadsworth's wife's crime? She had friends who were socialists. Gasp. Were any of them named Bernie Sanders, we wonder? Wadsworth decided to put Mr. Body behind bars and end his reign of blackmail terror by getting everyone together to confront him. Okay, so that's one mystery solved. Now who killed Mr. Body? The police will be here in 39 minutes. It must have been one of the people in this room, right? Who else could have done it? No one else is in the house except the cook. The guests rush to the kitchen, but the cook isn't there. Or is she? Mr. Green walks next to the pantry doors, as they swing open and the cook's body falls out with a knife stabbed right in her back. The guests take turns blaming each other. Colonel Mustard is being awfully rude. Mrs. White is a known murderer, she did have 5 husbands. Oh, but Mrs. Peacock had the knife. Of course, she put it down in the study. Anyone could have picked it up. Wadsworth suggests taking the cook's body back to the study. He likes to keep the kitchen tidy, after all. Pull it back in the study, the guests see that Mr. Body's body is gone. What? Mr. Body is nowhere to be found. So maybe he was the one who killed the cook? Of course, no one knows how that could have happened. Miss Scarlet snoops through the evidence file in the desk and finds some negatives of Colonel Mustard's rendezvous with ladies of the night. Mrs. Peacock heads to the bathroom, where she is attacked by the body of Mr. Body. This time, he's good and dead with a bloody head wound and everything. Everyone is in an uproar and Wadsworth declares that they've all got to find out who killed Mr. Body and where and with what. Hey, sounds like a board game we know and love. He shouts so loud that the candlestick that's resting on the top of the bathroom door falls off and knocks him in the head. Oof. Back in the study, the guests put the bodies of the cook and Mr. Body in the sofa. Wadsworth suggests putting the rest of the weapons into a locked cabinet in the study. He'll hold into the key ellipsis points, of course. That makes the other guests a little nervous. How do they know that Wadsworth isn't the murderer? Okay, they'll throw the key away. They all rush to the front door and open it to fling the key out, when they see a man standing at the door. Seems that his car has broke down by the house. Can he come in and use the phone? Wadsworth confers with the other guests and invites the man in. He can use the phone in the lounge. Wadsworth closes the door and locks the man inside. We'd be pretty concerned if we were that motorist. The guests all still want Wadsworth to throw away the key, so he does. He opens the front door and flings it out into the rainy night. Mrs. White wants to leave, but Wadsworth refuses to let any of them go, until they figure out what the heck is going on here. We've got a mystery in our hands, people, and no one is going home, until we know who's the murderer. Colonel Mustard pours drinks for everyone in the library and tries to figure out if there's anyone else in the house. But what are they gonna do about the motorist in the lung? Mrs. White asks. They can't throw him out into the rain, he'll get suspicious. They can't let him stay, oh, because then he'll really get suspicious. Oh, who cares about that dude? Mrs. Peacock tells everyone. There are 2 dead bodies in the study, people. The police are gonna be here in a half an hour. Okay, that's awful, but is anyone else in the house? Wadsworth says no, but how can they be sure? Colonel Mustard suggests they split up and search the house just in case. Wadsworth suggests that everyone draw straws to see who will pair up to search which areas. Mrs. Peacock and Professor Plum search the cellar. Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet are in charge of the first floor. Wadsworth and Mrs. White have the second floor. Mr. Green and Yvette get the spooky attic. Yikes. At the bottom of the attic stairs, Yvette and Mr. Green debate about who's gonna head up first into the scary attic. They decide to go together. Mr. Green is probably the only man in the party who doesn't enjoy hanging out with Yvette. In the cellar, Professor Plum and Mrs. Peacock make their way down some really dark stairs. To make matters worse, there are rats in the cellar. Yuck. In the second floor, Wadsworth and Mrs. White search separate rooms, but clearly don't trust each other. After all, what man would want to be alone with a suspected husband killer? In the main floor, Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet browse through the rooms that don't have a body or a stranded motorist in them. They eventually split up when Colonel Mustard chickens out a bit. This is all super tense and freaky. There really isn't anyone else in the house, is there? Is there? Out on the road by the house, a police officer sees the stranded motorist's vehicle. Uh-oh. This isn't good. Back in the study, someone burns all of Wadsworth's evidence in the fire and unlocks the cabinet with the weapons in it. In the lounge, the motorist is making his phone call. He tells the person in the other end that's a little nervous. He's been locked in this room in a house full of people. One of those people happens to be his old boss M-Bam. The motorist gets smacked on the head with the wrench and drops to the floor. Meanwhile, Miss Scarlet and Colonel Mustard are searching the conservatory when Colonel Mustard stumbles backwards into a secret passageway. The two decide to explore the passageway, which comes out right into the lounge ellipsis points, where a dead body happens to be laying on the floor next to the wrench. The passageway closes behind them and Miss Scarlet and Colonel Mustard freak out. They start banging on the lounge door begging to be let out. Everyone searching the house rushes to the door of the lounge. But the door is locked and guess what? Wadsworth doesn't have the key to it. It's gone. Wadsworth tries to break the door down, but Yvette has an idea. She runs into the study, grabs the gun from the cabinet, but she trips and the gun goes off, hitting the rope to the chandelier above them. She gets up and fires 2 shots into the lock of the door and it opens. But Colonel Mustard is ticked. Yvette could have killed them. Just then, the rope in the chandelier gives way and crashes down behind Colonel Mustard. This freaks everyone out, especially Colonel Mustard. So much for courage under fire. Everyone is freaked out more when Miss Scarlet points out the body in the lounge. But how did the Colonel and Miss Scarlet, how did they get into the room? The secret passageway, of course. Just then, Professor Plum realizes that Yvette has the gun from the locked cabinet. Nope. It's not unlocked anymore. Dun dun dun. And the doorbell rings again. No one wants to answer it, except Mr. Green. After all, he has nothing to hide and he didn't kill anyone. He swings open the door to see a police officer. Nice work, Mr. Green. This cop found an abandoned car and wondered if the motorist came up to their house for help. Who is this guy, Columbo? Everyone, except Mr. Green, says that they never saw a guy. This is pretty suspicious. Maybe the cop can use their phone real quick to make a call. Sure, Wadsworth tells him. Surely there's a phone in a room without a corpse in it, right? When he comes in, the cop asks if he knows Yvette. Then Wadsworth explains that they are so anxious because the chandelier just fell. Nice cover, Wadsworth. Wadsworth shows the officer into the library and, naturally, locks the door. The phone inside the library rings and the cop picks it up. The cop bangs on the door demanding to be let out of the room. He tells them that he'll arrest them all for wrongful imprisonment and obstructing an officer and ellipsis points murder. What? Murder? Wadsworth opens the door, but the cop laughs. He just said that so they would open the door. Funny, What is up around here? Why are they getting phone calls from J. Edgar Hoover? Wadsworth goes into the library to take the call and the cop asks if he can take a look around. This is gonna be tricky. While Mr. Green shows the cop the sights in the mansion, Miss Scarlet stages the rooms with actual dead bodies in them. When the cop walks in, he sees what he thinks are people enjoying a good old make-out fest. Clever girl. In the lounge, the cop finds the motorist who appears to be drunk. Dead drunk. The cop runs into Wadsworth as he leaves the library and tells him that he's seen everything and there's nothing illegal going on in this house. Ellipsis points Wadsworth didn't realize American laws were that lax. The cop asks if he can use the phone in the library again. And Wadsworth locks him in again. Oh, this is not gonna end well. The guests need to finish searching the house and the police will be here in 15 minutes. Actually, they're already here, Professor Plum points out. Everyone splits up again and resumes searching the house. Miss Scarlet comes across yet another secret passageway in the kitchen. It goes to the study where Mr. Body and the cook are resting on the sofas. Suddenly, all the electricity in the house goes off. Yvette sneaks downstairs in the dark and meet up with a mysterious stranger in the billiard room. The person asks if anyone recognized Yvette. Oh yeah, every inch of her body. Of course, she says this without her French accent. This girl is tricky. The mystery person throws the noose around Yvette's neck. She says, "It's you," as she chokes to death. Poor Yvette. R.I.P. Along with your boobs. Meanwhile, the cop is talking on the phone. Something really weird is going on around this house. He might even be in danger. He's right. Someone smacks him in the head with a lead pipe. Bullet. Just then, the doorbell rings. Again. It's a singing telegram girl. She's promptly shot with a revolver. Geez, her singing wasn't that bad. Everyone freaks out when they hear the gunshot. Wadsworth rushes downstairs and turns the power to the house back on. One by one, everyone heads back to the main floor. They survey the three new murders and Yvette in the billiard room with the rope, the cop in the library with the lead pipe, and the singing telegram girl at the front door with the revolver. This is turning out to be quite the dinner party. Back inside the house, Wadsworth notices that the gun is gone. Yvette dropped it by the broken chandelier. Very curious. Okay, good news everyone. Wadsworth knows exactly who did it and he's prepared to explain all. Oh, only after 6 murders. Do tell, Wadsworth. But first, Wadsworth's gonna have to take everyone through the events of the evening step by step. Sure. We love a good review. Wadsworth proceeds to race around the house and go through everything that has happened that evening. He was in the house with Yvette and the cook. The guests arrived one by one. They all ate dinner. They got their gifts in the study. And then Mr. Body turned out the lights. Okay, we saw all that already. But then Wadsworth reveals that Mr. Body couldn't have been dead the first time they found him lying on the floor. Professor Plum admits he must have made a mistake when examining him. Nice one, Professor. Wadsworth points out that the bullet grazed Mr. Body's ear, so he must have played dead, when he realized that one of the guests would rather kill him than Wadsworth. When the guests ran to the billiard room, as Yvette screamed, Wadsworth points out that one of them wasn't in the room. That person could have grabbed a knife, ran to the kitchen, and stabbed the cook, then snuck back down into the secret passageway back into the study. Who knew about the passageway? Wadsworth for one, but he's not the murderer, right? Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet found it, too, but claim not to have known. Miss Scarlet was with them all in the billiard room, so it couldn't have been her either. Why would anyone want to kill the cook? Turns out, she was part of Mr. Body's network of informants. So was Yvette. Wadsworth points out that Mrs. White knew Yvette. Her husband had an affair with Yvette. Yvette also worked for Miss Scarlet. Colonel Mustard was one of Yvette's clients, too, and wanted to stop Mr. Body from sending pictures of him and Yvette to the Colonel's mother. That would be something, Mrs. White points out. The Colonel told them all that both his parents were dead earlier in the evening. Wadsworth tells everyone that, while they were in the kitchen tending to the stabbed cook, someone snuck back down the secret passage, saw the not dead Mr. Body get up and followed him into the hall and bashed him with the candlestick. Wadsworth also didn't throw the key to the weapons cabinet away right away. Anyone could have taken it out of his pocket and substituted another one. Mr. Green points out that Colonel Mustard and Mrs. White's late husband have a connection. The Colonel is working on the next fusion bomb and Mr. White was a nuclear physicist. Wadsworth then explains that everyone who was murdered tonight was one of Mr. Body's informants. Wadsworth invited them all. Too bad they all got bumped off. The motorist was Colonel Mustard's driver during the war and he knew that Colonel Mustard made money by selling stolen military equipment. That's how he made all his money. So, it wasn't from dear old mommy and daddy after all. The cop was on Miss Scarlet's payroll. She bribed him so she could keep on doing her dirty work. The singing telegram girl was Professor Plum's patient and he had an affair with her. Professor Pert is more like it. But how would the murderer know about the other informants? Why kill all them? Well, the murderer read the documents that Wadsworth left in the study and then burned them. That person knew the truth about everyone in the house and who exactly had informed him. Just then, the doorbell rings again. It's a man with brochures talking about the kingdom of heaven. Mrs. Peacock tells him to get lost. We've gotta agree with her there and we're in the middle of a murder investigate, dude. Okay, now here's where the movie gets a little weird and it has 3 possible endings. 3 different murder mystery outcomes. This one is the first. Let Wadsworth explain. Turns out, none of the guests killed Mr. Body or the cook. The one person who wasn't with them in the study was Yvette. When she heard the gunshot, she thought Mr. Body was dead. She snuck into the study, picked up the knife Mrs. Peacock had dropped by the door, and ran to the kitchen to stab the cook. Then Yvette hurried back to the billiard room and screamed. Everyone ran to check on her and then rushed to the kitchen to find the cook dead. Meanwhile, Yvette hid in the study and saw Mr. Body get up and run away. She cracked him with the candlestick and stashed his body in the bathroom. But why? Maybe Yvette was acting under orders from the person who killed her later. Maybe it was her employer and Miss Scarlet. She denies it, but Wadsworth explains that Miss Scarlet was the one who killed the motorist in the lawn using the secret passageway. How did she know about the passage? Yvette told her. Oh, good theory. Later, Miss Scarlet was the one who switched off the electricity. She was on the main floor, so that was easy. She snuck into the cabinet and got the other weapons, strangled Yvette, killed the cop in her payroll, and shot the singing telegram girl at the front door. But, as Miss Scarlet points out, Wadsworth has no proof. Not quite. The gun is missing. Whoever has it is the murderer. Turn out, Miss Scarlet has it after all. She points the gun at everyone. Nice work, Wadsworth. But why did she do it? No one cared about the kind of naughty business she ran. Lots of people would have wanted to keep her dealings out of the spotlight. Miss Scarlet explains, that's not her real business. She traffics in secrets. Yvette found out secrets and gave them to Miss Scarlet. Oh, so this is all political. Miss Scarlet must be so communist then. No, she tells them. Communism is just a red herring. She's a capitalist and she's gonna sell her secrets to the highest bidder. In fact, all the guests can keep paying her in government secrets. If she wants them to keep quiet about what she knows about them, that is. Of course, Wadsworth is just a butler. He doesn't have any high-level secrets. Why should Miss Scarlet keep him around? Oh, Wadsworth does know something. There's no more bullets left in that gun. 6 shots have already been fired. 1 shot at Mr. Body, 2 at the chandelier, 2 at the long door, and 1 at the singing telegram. No, Miss Scarlet says, there were only 5 shots. There was only 1 shot for the chandelier. They argue about the math for a minute before Miss Scarlet tells Wadsworth to shut up. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. Yet again. The police rush in and arrest Miss Scarlet. Turns out, Wadsworth is a secret agent working for J. Edgar Hoover. And there are no more bullets left in the gun. Except when Wadsworth fires up to the ceiling he finds out there are. Whoops. The bullet grazes the rope to the other chandelier and the one comes crashing down right behind Colonel Mustard. Again. Okay, now we're on to the second ending. Wadsworth explains again how the last 3 victims were murdered and then drops this bombshell and Mrs. Peacock did it. Mrs. Peacock was the one missing when the cook and Mr. Body were murdered. In fact, the cook was Mrs. Peacock's chef. Remember how much she loved the recipe at dinner. But why would she have murdered everyone else? Just in case Mr. Body had told them about Mrs. Peacock's bad deeds. Wow, is there anything this featherhead won't do to keep her dirty deeds to herself? So, this doesn't have anything to do with Colonel Mustard's work in a new fusion bomb or a missing nuclear physicist. Nope. Communism is just a red herring. Mrs. Peacock is the mastermind. Oh, but there's no proof, Mrs. Peacock's quips. Of course, there is. Wadsworth tells everyone that the gun is missing. Whoever has it is the murderer. You're enough, it's Mrs. Peacock. Wadsworth tells Mrs. Peacock that he doesn't plan to turn her in. No. He doesn't approve of murder, but she's only killed a terrible blackmailer and his network of spies. Who cares, right? But aren't the police coming? Mr. Green asks. No one's called them, Wadsworth explains. So that whole countdown was a lie. We feel so misled. Wadsworth suggests stacking the bodies in the cellar. Then they can all leave one by one and forget this mess ever happened. Good idea, Mrs. Peacock says. She'll leave first. And she heads out the front door. Once she's gone, Wadsworth explains that Mrs. Peacock isn't gonna get away with anything. He works for the FBI, that explains the call from J. Edgar Hoover, and she's totally going down for these crimes. Outside, the preacher man from the front door confronts Mrs. Peacock at her car. Turns out he's a cop and the lady is going away for a long time. Would anyone care for fruit or dessert? Wadsworth wonders. Wouldn't want to leave your guests famished, now would we? And the final ending, which is our personal favorite, goes something like this. Wadsworth goes through the murders one by one. Professor Plum was actually the one who fired the gun in Mr. Body when the lights went out. Then, he pretended Mr. Body was dead so he could bash him on the head later with the candlestick. The professor was the missing person when they were in the kitchen with the cook. But who killed the cook? Mrs. Peacock disappeared while they were in the billiard room with Yvette. The cook was her cook. Remember how she loved her recipe at dinner, and she knew the cook had sold Mr. Body her secrets. How about the motorist? Colonel Mustard took the key from Wadsworth's pocket while they were all huddled at the front door and then suggested everyone split up. He separated from Miss Scarlet, opened the weapons cabinet, ran through the secret passageway, killed the motorist who was his driver during the war, and came back through. And Yvette. Mrs. White snuck away, turned out the lights, and strangled Yvette. She never got over the fact that Yvette had an affair with her husband. She hated Yvette so much it felt like flames coming out of the sides of her face. Flames. The cop. Miss Scarlet grabbed the lead pipe in the dark and smashed the cop who she'd been bribing with the lead pipe. True. Man, Wadsworth is good. How about the singing telegram? It must have been Mr. Green, right? No, he protests. It wasn't him. In fact, whoever has the gun is the one who shot the girl. Turns out, it's Wadsworth. So the butler did it after all. Mr. Green was just about to tell everyone the truth, but Wadsworth beats him to it. Why do they all think Mr. Body is dead? They've never met him. Nope. Wadsworth is Mr. Body. He's the one who's been blackmailing them all. Oh, Wadsworth, you devil. So did Professor Plumkill, Wadsworth's butler. Darn. This has actually worked out pretty well for Wadsworth. His network of spies is conning and there's no blood in his hands. This also has nothing to do with Mrs. White's nuclear physicist husband or Colonel Mustard's work in the new fusion bomb. Of course not, Wadsworth explains. Communism, naturally, was just a red herring. Mr. Green points out that the police are coming. Not quite, Wadsworth says. No one's called them. He suggests stacking the bodies in the cellar and leaving one by one and forgetting all about it. And he'll just keep on blackmailing everyone. Oh, that sounds like fun. But Mr. Green doesn't like that one bit. He pulls out a gun and fires at Wadsworth. The butler/blackmailer is dead. So who exactly is Mr. Green? He's FBI. The phone call from J. Edgar Hoover was for him. Remember how he told everyone he didn't do it? Well, that was a true story. Mr. Green opens the front door and the cops rush in. Who did it? They all did. Of course, if you wanna know who killed Mr. Body, it was Mr. Green in the hall with the revolver. Cute, Mr. Green. Mr. Green tells the cops to arrest everyone, then announces he's gonna go home and sleep with his wife. Figures. Everything about this guy is a lie.